that's one of my favorite things about the stage of life I'm in, where I'm not fully retired, but I wouldn't really want to be anyway, because I love contributing and having sort of my some skin in the game with our business, but not all the responsibility. So I get opportunities all the time to ask questions and listen and offer sometimes guidance and counsel, but a lot of it is just being with someone fully, really, really, really being there.
It's a lot less about fixing than it is about loving.
Being with.
Like, we get distracted by this idea that we got to fix everybody that's around us. Yeah. And really, like, we're not called by God to fix. We're called by God to love.
Yeah. That's good.
With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more.
Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. Michael Thompson here with, you can tell this is not SJ, but two of my dear and important friends in my life, Jim McCauley and Tom Benner. And we are in the middle, actually, this is part 2 of our Redeeming Generational Masculinity series. And we're walking through some of those different stages of masculinity. And so, elder sages, you guys are on the young side.
Yeah, we're limping into this stage.
Well, you don't want to limp into elder sage, but you are just stepping into this elder sage stage. You still have, you're recently retired, Jim, of a year or so ago?
Yeah, about a year and a half, yeah.
Yeah, and Tom, you still got a foot in the game.
Yeah, I'm kind of in and out.
But have really established some of these handoffs that elder sages often do. So we're going to dive into a little bit about this stage and generational masculinity and the opportunity to explore a lot more of that. And I'm glad you're here. But first, we want to take a quick break and let you see this.
Being an elder sage, it helped and strengthened my relationship with Christ and enabled me to be transparent and telling my story that I didn't even know I had a story. How ironic is that? Honestly, I never knew I had a story. Actually, until I got here, this year here. I never knew I had a story. I never knew it was important to anybody. I never knew anybody was interested in my story. My story. Why are you interested in me? You don't see me. You don't acknowledge. You don't even like me. That's what I had in my head all these years. And being an elder sage, that you see something in me that I never saw, that I'm someplace that I never expected to be. I'm a black man around a whole bunch of white men. Really? Really? That's really unheard of. You know, I was born near the tail end of segregation. You know, I saw the hurt and pain and the disrespect and prejudice coming up. I kind of sort of experienced that, but not fully. I thank God for that. But yeah, my expectation was that will never happen. I will never be accepted. And then my father never really accepted me, so how am I expecting any other man to accept me? You know, but I'm here, and I thank God for it. And it's the relationship in which I have. I'm beginning to understand him as I read his word and as he talks to me, and I begin to listen, that I can be me because he loves me. He's not going to let anything happen to me.
Learn more about the Elder Sage Initiative by going to zoe.org/elder sage. That's ZOWEH.org/elder sage.
Welcome back, friends and allies, with Tom Benner, Jim McCauley, elder sages in my life. I have a handful, and I am very, very blessed to say that. And we're looking at redeeming generational masculinity here at Zoe. And so, yeah, I thought we would just dive in. I know there's things that we could do much more probably profoundly in introducing you and our relationship. Maybe some of that will come up as we roll. But I'd love to jump into just this idea. Let's just talk about the idea of redeeming generational masculinity first. Jim, you were part of that summit that we had about 40 guys in from around the country that were being briefed on this and exploring this. What does that mean now to you, redeeming generational masculinity? What do you see and feel?
Yeah, I think the whole idea of redeeming generational masculinity is an articulation of a kingdom concept. I think that in our culture we've segmented the generations. We've separated, whether it's in schools or whether it's in church or whether it's at the YMCA. Everybody gets divided into their group.
Their age group, yeah.
Into their age group, yeah. And I think what you did and what we were able to do at that summit was simply to say, hey, the kingdom is a completely different animal. In the kingdom, men, women, even families are mixed. Yeah. The way that God designed this thing is intergenerational. It's grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, and we want to reclaim it. And we've started to put words to what I think is a well-known and God-designed concept.
Yeah, that's good. Tom, when you hear it, where does it take your heart? Just generational masculinity, and then we can sure talk about redeeming it. But
well, what comes up immediately is this idea that masculinity is something that you catch from another man. It's bestowed. It's something that you don't necessarily teach it, but you experience it by being with a man who has taken a journey maybe that you haven't yet. And so the idea being that we want to encourage men that have gone further on their journey with God in the pursuit of intimacy and freedom. Mm-hmm. Those men have learned things that younger men need to know. Yeah. And so I think it's a powerful thing to think about encouraging men to be an instrument, to be someone who's willing to just share their presence, their words, their attention, and sometimes guidance, but a lot of times just asking questions, haven't had the ability to clarify what is it you want, what is it, what's missing, how helping a man explore the depths of his heart to discover where he's stuck, where he needs help, and where maybe we could help as older men. Yeah. So I think it's a really empowering thing and important thing.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't take long to get 10 thoughts, seriously, just with those comments and those responses. I had the opportunity to interview 4 kings. All of them happened to be in the UK, so it was kind of this Zoom interview about the stages of masculinity. So these are just at 40-somethings, so they're in the younger places, younger spots of that. After warrior, 20s and 30s, and kind of into our roughly young kings. And about being caught, he tells a story about when he was 8, going to a football match, right? Soccer, going to a big football match with his dad. And what he witnessed with his dad and his friends, he thought men yelled a lot, drank beer, and were either, really happy or really hacked.
Yeah.
That's what men do. That must be what it means to be a man. I mean,
and a lot of them do that.
How impressionable, right? As we watch each other, to your point, and who are we looking to, and what are we looking for when we look to and look for men to show us how to be men? Yeah. There's the generational, part of this. Go ahead. Yeah.
And if I could just jump on that, because Tom mentioned it too. One of the things that I think is really excited about it is redeeming generational masculinity in the context of Zoe, and the Zoe message is a game changer. I don't want my 37-year-old son to be influenced, redeemed generationally by some guy he meets at the weight room at the YMCA. I don't want my 30-something-year-old son to have those kind of experiences to learn to catch whatever it is from men that aren't oriented And so this whole thing in the context of Zoe is a completely different. It's a completely different animal.
Yeah, and so to that, just to segue, and SJ and I got to talk a good bit about what is this overarching look like, and we're going to dive kind of down into the elder sage space particularly, but yeah, Jim, I think about you said being an oriented man, so. We believe it at first has to start with your heart. Whether you're 20-something or 70-something, the idea of healing and training and validation and initiation from God, yes, through and partnering with others, whether it's an environment like we created our encounter weekends, or it's one of the books, which those are great, but the kingdom really does seem to work in and through handoffs, through touch, through connecting, through engagement, through pursuit, through questions and answers. It works like that. And so you were bringing up family, your sons, and we're part of this kingdom family. And you have sons and daughters and granddaughters, so I'm amazed that there's a couple ways this plays out, really. Like, to your point, my children, who are they going to get this from? Who are they watching? Right. So there's that responsibility. And then there's this culture that we're after at Zoe, which is kind of the surrogate, the adopters, the ones who will say, hey, I'll step into this and be your friend. I'll step into this and because I want to know you, because you matter. And so you have the family tree of, the Benners, the Macaulays, the Thompsons, and then you have this kingdom family tree of brothers and sisters in the kingdom. And what does it look like to be, good men who are good for the hearts of others? All the way back to, it starts with you and your heart. You reclaiming, you redeeming, you recovering ground in your story that maybe didn't go so well. And the opportunity to, recovery. We think of recovery. So before we dive, I just want to segue there, and this is unprepared in notes, but was there something in your story that you got to recover from that you have found to be incredibly helpful to others, to generations, to something that happened in your story that God did to you and for you? Tom,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think every one of us, in some way or another, are stuck in places in our heart which got hardened, which got wounded, which got bitter. Yeah. And there's this thing called unforgiveness that gets lodged there and sticks there, and is, for me, was a huge hindrance to me experiencing God fully, because I projected what I experienced with my dad onto God. And so really what a cataclysmic change in my story came when I was able to truly do that with God's help. And it was a process. It didn't happen overnight. But the beautiful thing was, all of a sudden, I could see things I couldn't see before, even in him and what he had done for me that was very, very good and very helpful. But until that day came, I was pretty much blind to all of the good. Mm-hmm. And so that just took the cover off of something in me that led to much more intimacy with God, much more connection, and a lot of freedom that I don't think I would be experiencing today had I not gone through that process. And it took time, and it took some tears, and it took some help from other men, a good brother, a elder sage in my life that led me into that, and then encouraged me to keep going. So yeah, that was one of them. That was a big one.
Yeah, we have this idea within all the generations, but particularly elder sages who have journeyed longer, that it's almost impossible. At least we could say it's very, very difficult to impart what you don't own. Mm-hmm. And so in the spirit of that, right?
And if we're trying to encourage men, to use a term we use a lot, get your heart back, become wholehearted. Find those places where you're not, where there's brokenness, and go after those, and go after them with other men, because it's not a good idea to try to go it alone. We know that, and it'll take what they say, a village. It'll take other men. It'll take a community, and that's what I've found in this group of men in Zoe is there is just a plethora of people who are going in the same direction. And are encouraging the same kinds of things. And so that's probably one of the greatest things that happened in my life was running into friends like you, and then eventually you and some of the other brothers here, and then as couples with the women. And we've really journeyed together for that exact purpose of getting wholehearted, becoming wholehearted, and getting free. And it's at this stage of my life as a sage, I guess you would call, or an elder sage, that's the label we're using for people that are trying to live this way. It's been transformative. And I can tell you I'm a different person today by a long shot than I was when I got started with this.
And we've journeyed a long time together.
Yeah, we have.
All of us. And I think about watching you, if I could say it this way, some of your most significant contributions in the kingdom have been happening in these years. I've gone to the hilltop, I've gone to the valley, I've come back and I found some things. I found some things to be true. These lies that I took up there and said, Jesus, I don't want these. Father, I don't want to live under that unforgiveness. And so to go there and then come back. Then you start to be able to guide people. It just happened this weekend. One of our team was encountering an elder sage, and we were just talking about this, Caleb, this morning, how the king, right, the 40-something, late 40s, it just so happened that the elder sage who got a hold of him has a very similar father wounding story.
Yeah, real kingdom stuff.
And I find that very ironic.
That's a God thing.
That it's that match. It's that caddy, right? Bagger, for Juna. It's that Miyagi for Daniel. It's that person of the elder sage type that could listen and love well a king who was, still on his comeback, as we all are to some degree. Jim, thoughts on...
Well, Tom talked about getting his heart back, finding his heart. My experience, the first thing that comes to my mind is finding my voice. So the irony is that everybody that knows me knows that I have a voice.
You're a boomer.
Like I'm loud. My voice carries. My laugh is loud. I have a voice.
You sneeze loud.
Yeah. And yet, one of the things that, as I've been engaged in this message over the last years, one of the things that God has taught me through the encouragement of other men is to have the confidence to express my voice, to express that thing that comes from inside of me, not to be consumed by testing the waters, not to be consumed by speaking somebody else's word, but to be able to express what's coming. Like we sometimes talk about out of my glory, about who is the man that God made me to be. And if I don't speak with my voice, if I try to pretend to speak with Michael's voice or Tom's voice or somebody else's voice, then my voice, the voice that God gave me, gets left behind. Yeah. And I've found incredible encouragement here and in similar spaces to this, where people have said, I needed to hear that, or thank you for saying that, or thank you for engaging. I haven't heard that before. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, you're normal. Your normal is different than
that's another way of saying it.
Than when your voice was in some ways captive to fear of I'll say the wrong thing or I'll say something that isn't helpful. So, man,
I've had a voice. I've had a voice that was effective in other contexts. we sometimes talk about that as like being a false self or the false voice or this poser voice, you know. And I had a voice that was really effective in the context of our business and the kind of things that we did in the trade, you know. But it has turned out to be a very different voice than God has begun to draw from me in a different context.
Yeah, that's good. So jumping a little bit to, you know, the elder sage role, and I think I'm going to throw it back to Jim first, Tom, with there's a certain ability to pay attention. It should be. We want that to be true of the elder sage. And you talk about this quite a bit. I think you bang the table, bang the drum, hit the table with this, that I think the comment is look for those divine appointments. Look for those collision courses, right? Look for, you're looking for younger men to maybe not be, you know, their elder sage, but you don't know if it's going to be a one-time encounter or if it's just going to be, or if it's going to be something more. But speak to that in terms of the elder sage and the elder sage initiative. I think there's certain things like paying attention and even being intentional, over kind of stepping over. Sometimes it's a line. Sometimes it feels like you got to climb a wall to be courageous enough to introduce yourself, to welcome somebody, to move toward them. But that's kind of your normal.
Yeah. I think I like to talk about it often in terms of what I call divine encounters. I didn't make up that word. That I borrowed that. But recently, again, I came across the story in Exodus about, you know, this guy named Moses that's wandering around someplace, and he comes across this bush that's burning, right? And he chooses to stop and turn, walk toward it, and investigate. Okay, that was a divine encounter for Moses, but I happen to think, and my experience bears it out, if nobody else's, that we are confronted by those kind of burning bushes in the forms of people in a space, in a form of young men at a weekend, in the form of somebody that you meet at a dinner party or some other place, where somebody who really wasn't paying attention or aware of the possibility of divine encounters might just walk right by and never turn their head to investigate. Like Moses said, "What's this?" You know, and I think two things. The first thing is to be alert to the fact that God will put burning bushes in our path, right? We will see them. We can walk by them, or we can turn to investigate. And then the burning bush would speak for itself, whether that's a relationship that's going to happen, or whether it or in the short term or long term. But I think being alert to the fact that God has these kinds of things scripted for us, and being alert to the fact that we can walk right by, are two really important points.
Yeah. Yeah.
That get after what you were looking for?
Yeah, it does. I think there's a quality about the elder sage that somehow has arrived at that perspective. You know, I don't know how many they might have walked by, you know, but something that we're after is that's a part of their equipping that they're looking for. They're paying attention.
Yeah.
They're burning bushes don't become abnormal. They realize that there are men that that might need to connect with me. That's not a prideful thing. I think, Tom, you said something earlier about questions, and I could look at some of my texts from you even recently in the last few weeks, and some of the personal things that have happened in my life, and losing a parent and stuff, and you know, there's a few question marks on those texts. You know, do you have time? Could we get together? I have some thoughts, or I'd like to see how you're doing. You know, so talk about that question. And I'm not saying you're you're putting on your elder sage hat and you're going and doing that. I'm saying you just do that now. So,
well, I think one of the qualities we're hoping that we all develop as we age, because we have less to be concerned about in terms of, building your empire or building your business or, whatever, however you want to talk about it. But you'd get a little bit freer with your attention. You get a little bit freer with what you have margin for in your life, so that that's one of my favorite things about the stage of life I'm in, where I'm not fully retired, but I wouldn't really want to be anyway, because I love contributing and having sort of my some skin in the game with our business, but not all the responsibility. So I get opportunities all the time to ask questions and listen and offer sometimes guidance and counsel, but a lot of it is just being with someone fully, really, really, really being there. That's a rare thing today. People's attention is so scattered, and it's so hard for all of us because we've just got all this stuff pulling. But as we get into this elder sage stage, we really can kind of trim that back and really have the ability to walk with God more deeply, to be more focused on like we were saying, getting our heart back so we can be available to another person, where we're not looking to get something from them. We're really offering. We're really ready to offer. It's sort of a different posture. When our hearts are settled and we're not trying to get our identity out of our work or, our accomplishments, it just becomes a different process altogether. And so that's really, I think, if we can encourage men to be willing to just be with, to spend some time, because any relationship's going to take time. I mean, it's effort, and it needs regular time. Yeah. If you're going to introduce yourself into that kind of mentoring situation, or even just friendship, it takes a consistent amount of effort to be together. And I'll tell you, when someone wants to be regularly with you, that speaks a lot. Yeah. That says, because you got a lot of choices in life how to spend your time, and to say, I'd like to have a meal with you once a week, or I'd like to meet, for coffee, not just once or twice, but as an ongoing thing, and it can be a very mutual exchange too. It's not always one giving to the other. There's just so much good that can happen in that kind of dynamic.
Yeah, we've all, just a quick segue. I mean, we've all chased men for a time, and then eventually, you feel that, man, if I don't initiate, if I don't pursue, if I don't, do the chasing, is this really, is it that one-sided, so that reciprocal, that kind of relationship where bestowing can take place has got to be both. As an elder sage or as a king, I want to spend some time with the men who have goodness for me. Not always what I want to hear. As we talked recently, Tom, about forgiveness, unforgiveness. They were reminders, but it was a kind conversation. Yet I'm not sure that I was able yet to move forward. Yeah. But it still meant a lot. Right. It wasn't just accomplishing some goal or task like as the president or VP of sales. This is the objective. So I think about how do you know when to pursue and when to take a strategic step back as elder sages.
You want to hit first?
Well, I would just say, usually there's that resonance, there's that connection, there's a spiritual dynamic that goes on where you just that's the divine appointment. This is Because not every divine appointment necessarily leads into a long-term relationship or even a regular for a season. Yeah. It doesn't always do that, but some do. And most of the ones that do, I would categorize as divine appointments. Yeah. That's when God puts you together with someone, and two people see, hey, I'd love to get to know your story. I'd love to know more. I'd love to learn some things that you've learned, and vice versa. And it's usually a very life-exchanging kind of thing.
So you've quoted it before, Michael, but I love it. C.S. Lewis wrote a series of essays, 4 essays, on love, and my favorite one, and I think Lewis's favorite one himself, was the essay on friends.
Yeah.
And he talks about the moment where you sit across the table in a pub, right? Mm-hmm. Or you sit across the table, and you can look into the eyes of the other guy and say, "What? You too?" Right? So what I'm saying is, in these divine encounters, like Tom said, some of them are just a moment of encouragement. Some of them are a week on a vacation, but some of them are what? You too? And so I would say what happens is this reciprocity emerges very quickly. It emerges very quickly. Because there's nothing about the elder sage thing that has anything to do with just an agenda or vomiting a bunch of stuff out on the table for you to clean up. There's this amazing, and I bang this drum with the elder sages all the time, there's this amazing reciprocity that comes because you get as much or more than you give. And that's, I think, when you can tell this thing is working. This is a capital D, capital E divine encounter.
That's good. All right, so there's men out there who are coming across this conversation, and they could be younger men who know older men that they respect, and they forward or they offer this conversation. So let's say there was a few older men, sitting right here in our audience of one. Caleb's always our audience running things here, but there's an audience of some, late 60s, 70s, maybe even early 80s men that, what do you mean? What does it look like to be an elder sage? How can I'm interested. I like what you're talking about. I'd like for my life, as many, we've said the fourth quarter, I'd like for whatever I have left, as Leonard says, to be offered in this space. Yeah, what would you say to a guy who's really curious about how do you, I'm interested. How do you do this? What's the process look like?
I would say, as I look across that group of guys that are sitting out in that space you just imagined, most of them do not believe that what we're talking about could be for them, right? They see retirement as being a time, or they see retirement or being men of the age that we are as being a time of being set apart, And our culture advertises, well, being set apart is a really good thing. You got nothing to do. And yet I think I would say to guys like that you have something to do, and finding that is going to change your life. If you've never had these kind of relationships, either as a younger man or as an older man currently, if you've never had these kind of relationships, we can offer you something that's going to change your life. So we might think that this is all about changing somebody else's life, the warrior or the king, But what I would say is this is something that's going to change your life. So how do you do it? So I would say we have literally a vehicle.
Yeah.
Like if you just join with us, like there's this thing, there's 60, 70, 80 men right now that are engaged with what we're talking about. Some of them are like our seniors in the class, and some of them are freshmen.
Yeah.
But we got a thing. Like we're starting to talk about it. We're exploring how to train. We're exploring how to help men get their hearts in the right place in order that they have something to offer. it's not a 12-step program.
Right.
You know, kingdom stuff is life on life. It's relational. It's just what Tom just said. This is right. But we have ways. We can help men to get going in the right direction. Not because they have to, but because they get to.
Right. That's really good. There's a, like anything, when you take it on, and I would, you know, Tom and I have played golf together. You're a great golfer, by the way. I have golf clubs. That's different. I have tennis rackets, but there's friends of mine who can play tennis. I have a tennis racket. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I have a surfboard.
Now, I can. Now, I'm a former player, so I can go to a gym, and there's a certain kind of way that you want to play. But there's a lot of guys that come into a gym. Are they players? So my point is, the elders say. So we're talking about redeeming generational masculinity. The video series is come out and being dropped, and specifically, it is the elder sages talking about this redeeming generational masculinity. So that series is available, and that tells men of this age and of this kind, you know, where they could go to subscribe, to sign up, literally, to sign up and enter into what would be training. And my point was training. You know, just because you're of a certain age doesn't necessarily make you an elder sage. And the opportunity to enter into that training, we said, you know, the first part is to pursue intimacy with God for you. Right, that you get your heart back, that you pursue wholeheartedness, that you recover from your past, because much of the training and the bestowing is about helping somebody else in their healing. So if you haven't experienced that, and that's why I think it was important for you to share a little bit of that correlation. Go ahead. Well,
I mean, I kind of shrink back a little bit from the label of a sage. I mean, I am an elder. I get that. That's pretty easy to determine. But that title, you know, means a lot to me, you know, and it is something to aspire to, and it is almost like a bar that we've set, that we're hoping that we can encourage more men to pursue, you know, wisdom and the ability to explain some of the kingdom things that we're learning, and to be able to come alongside another man and even encourage and inspire him to change a few things. Yeah, we can't just. We need to change some things in our lives in order to move in a different direction, and that's one of the hardest things, I think. But if you have somebody that's willing to do it with you and talk about it and give a little bit of direction as to what that might look like, that's just so valuable. And I think that's what the men that's what we're wanting men to rise up to.
Yeah.
And as much as there's change of heart, like you're talking about, there are some tips and techniques that are just that can be offered. You know, one of I think one of the best things that we could say to a man who would hope to become an elder sage is how important it is to just be quiet. Yeah. Just don't talk. Like really, just don't talk.
They'll definitely.
And if you're gonna speak, ask a question. Don't tell. So, like a guy could go pretty far down the road.
That's part of our elder sage training.
They could go pretty far down the road towards becoming sagely, right? By thinking to myself, I'm not going to talk. And secondly, when I speak, it's going to be in the form of a question.
Yeah, I think that to wrap it up, that the elder sage is the sagely part, right? The wisdom part is in that vein, and it's learning that this is not as much about what I know and can tell you. This is more about where are you.
Very good.
Yeah. Where are you on the journey, and then. If you can get through that gate, if you can get through those few miles, then you might have the opportunity to really share. But if you don't know where that younger heart is, because the elder sages have that ability to kind of look back over the masculine journey at the 20, 30, or 40-somethings. And to your point, if this is about pursuing another man's story, our elder sages, that's kind of... After pursuing their intimacy with God and getting their healing for training, that's the next big mile marker. And that one's it. That's it. And learning how to listen, learning how to ask questions, learning how to pursue, because that is one of the most loving things you can do.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say. What you're describing is being present and listening is loving.
Yeah,
I mean, your wife will tell you that if you try that out a few times.
Right.
You'll see the response is powerful.
This is less about theological prowess. Mm-hmm. This is less about, what I've accomplished, what I think politically, what I believe, and da-da-da. I mean, this is just so much less about that.
Well, one more thing I'd say, and I've said this before, it's a lot less about fixing than it is about loving.
Being with.
Like, we get distracted by this idea that we got to fix everybody that's around us. Yeah. And really, like, we're not called by God to fix. We're called by God to love.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. Mm. And spoken like an elder sage, both of you. I love that you are less quick to put that mantle on. That's to me an elder sage. There's I don't know, but I'll give it a shot. I'll try.
I'll grow into it.
I'll enter in. I'll grow into it, Yeah. And so I think these are all part of that posture of what elder sages learn, what they recover from, and then hopefully what they can offer. So because if we're going to see generational masculinity redeemed, what God showed us was, let's start with this group and see what they might have to offer these groups, rather than 6 and 8 and 15-year-olds. Like youth programs are awesome.
Yeah.
And we were asked the other day, hey, what's the appropriate age to bring to the encounter weekend? And if he's with his dad, maybe 16, 17. But how much of that young heart's story is in front of them, and how much of the forecast can he even take in? But there's something about when you start to get into that warrior stage, 20s, 30s. Yeah, this is hard, man. The battle, life outside the garden, my world, my marriage, my finances, my one kid became 3 kids, boom, boom, boom. And there's just a different attentiveness. And I love what Josh said, and he'll be on the next podcast with the Warriors, with Caleb and I think Cole. He said, I want to be known, but it's hard for me to ask because I don't want to appear as if I don't know. So if that is in the undercurrent of what we're up against, it's just good to know.
Yeah.
That you're going to have to be able to swim in that current of masculine relationships. Yeah. I mean, does that go away from just that stage? Is that can be in the king stage? Mm-hmm. That can be, I don't want to appear as if I don't know what I'm doing. And then back to C.S. And then back to C.S. And then back to Lewis, right?
Yeah.
Wait, you too?
Mm-hmm.
Boom.
Yeah.
And now we have a ground we can stand on together. And
right,
maybe
Michael.
I can help you up, or you can help me up. Faithful is the friend who can help you up. And three is even better, right? Really, so, hey, thank you guys for just exploring this with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I think there's tons more to talk about, but I think we hopefully we brought some kind of intrigue or provoking or encouraging to you and your masculine journey. And we invite you to come with us. There's an event in April where 400 guys will come together of all different shapes, sizes, generations, social backgrounds, racial spaces, all kinds of opportunities there. So we hope you'll join us at the Heart of Warrior Encounter the end of April. And I know Caleb's going to be throwing some stuff on the podcast for places you can go to see the video series, to get into this conversation, maybe even create a watch party. And for those moments where I think guys can watch the video series and go, those guys too?
Yeah. Maybe you could stimulate a divine encounter.
That's right. All the above. So zoe.org/ Elder Sage is a website you can go to, and I'm sure Caleb will put that on there. So, hey, thank you guys for
Thanks, Michael.
stepping into exploring more.
Thanks, Caleb.
And, we invite you guys out there to do the thing, like, share, forward, pass along. And if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to email us at exploringmore@zoe.org. We'll see you next time on the Exploring More podcast.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.